Hi, my name is Raina with TV3, and today I wanted to share an inspiring story from a friend of mine. You know, we all know amazing people, and I just wanted to share one of the amazing people in my life. And Carrie and I met in college in Thief River Falls, Minnesota, and we've been friends ever since then, over 20 years. She is originally from Warroad, Minnesota, and currently her and her husband live in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So they have an adoption story that's not a typical adoption story. And so I just wanted you to hear her amazing journey through this process.
It was a very long journey, a lot longer than I think most adoptions go. I don't think all of them go like this. We had found an adoption agency in our hometown, and we were with them for 2 years, but obviously there's so much work you have to do before you're actually established and ready to go and ready for your profile to see, expectant mothers. So you have to do all that work, which paperwork is just huge. It's almost like you're taking college courses. You got to get all your paperwork. You have several background checks. You have home study. You have interviews. All of that. Once you get that all done, which usually takes a couple months depending on how hardcore you are in getting it done, and once you have that all done, then you are finally finalized and ready to go. So your profile's ready, whether that is a Snapfish book, whether it's just a bunch of papers with your pictures and information about you. There's several ways each agency does it. So you get that all done, and then it kind of depends on what maybe the birth mom is looking for. So she might suggest, hey, I only want an all-white couple or an all-African-American couple, or it doesn't matter. But either way, not all profiles are going to match what that mom wants. So you may be at the top of the adoption list, but if the mom doesn't want anything to do with, say, a family that's predominantly white, then they're not going to show yours. But you're more apt to be shown once you get toward the top of the list. And with the agency that we were with, after 2 years, they decided to discontinue their adoption services. So we had to start from the get-go. But you can't transfer stuff.
So essentially, are you saying like you had to kind of, it's like you're in a magazine essentially hoping someone's going to flip through you. It's like shopping for a house kind of a deal?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, sometimes they won't care and they'll have the agency pick you, which is very rare nowadays. But yeah, for the most part, they just look through and see who they might like best. Sometimes they go off pictures, like the littlest things. I heard a story about a dad that was taking their other child deer hunting, and they're like, oh, these people deer hunt. They like nature. I'm going to go with them. Really, it could just be by a photo, and they're like, I like them, honestly, you just never know. Yeah.
And then what were some of the things that you had to get ready? Like you were saying paperwork, and I mean, did you have to get your house all ready, baby proof kind of a thing?
To an extent, yes, because they do a home study, but I think people freak out about the home study, which we did. It's really, they're just talking to you and you're showing them their house. You just show, hey, I have a room for that child. Our hot water is set at a certain temperature. If you have a gun, you have it in a safe, and the ammunition in a separate safe. Super easy, calm. I mean, yeah, it was the easiest thing. Sure, you think you need to clean it all and dust it all, but they don't care. They just want to see that you have a house and that it's actually standing, and you have like a fire survival, like you have the fire extinguishers, you have a ladder, and then you have a plan to get out of the house. I mean, you had to write up that and you had to draw up that. As far as paperwork goes, it's everything you could imagine in a background check for your paperwork. You have to name your grandparents, relatives, any disease. I mean, it can be extended to your great-grandparents, how they met, the year they got married. I mean, it's everything you could even imagine. It's like those things you filled out when you were in elementary school about your grandparents and what day did they get married. And I mean, it's so extensive. It has your background, it has your emotional background, your physical background, your mental health, anything. I mean, it seriously is like you're going through college courses. They'll drop everything. Your police report, how many speeding tickets you have, anything you can imagine is there for them to see.
Wow. Okay. So maybe some misconceptions about adoption are maybe getting cleared up.
It's not easy. You can't just go and pick up a child. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So, okay. So you then had to go through a different agency.
Yes. So we had to start all completely over. They're not going to transfer anything. Your home study's not going to transfer. Your paperwork's not going to transfer. Nothing. You start from ground zero. So then you have to find another agency, and depending on where you live, there's not like a ton, but 2 hours from where we live, they have a few more options than what we have in our local town. So we found an agency there, fell in love with them. I think the part that we loved the most is they were just so caring about everybody associated with adoption. Because some people, which is completely fine, which this is how my husband and I were, Chad, we didn't think about open adoption. But this agency was all for it, and they did a lot of, like, we went to a lot of classes, and they talked a lot about how emotionally and mentally stable it is for everybody around, but most importantly for the child, because they're always going to want to know where they come from. No matter how well you parent that child, their heart's going to have a little bit of a hole wondering where they came from. It would be natural for anybody to want to know where they came from. You would want to know who made you. You would want to know your parents. And the fact that that birth mom and even birth father are making that extremely difficult choice to walk away from that child, I mean, it's incredible. And I think it's very important that if they want to be a part, you can send pictures, you know, and I loved that the agency cared about everybody. Now, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can be specific and say, listen, I really don't want an open adoption. So I liked the aspect that they cared about everybody, and we're like, let's go with this organization. But we had to start over. So you start over a new round of paperwork, background checks, interviews, everything again. So that takes time. You know, so it's a whole nother year of finding an agency, whole nother year of getting that paperwork. So from start to finish, it was 5 years, which is not typical. Most people never take that long. Ours was just a whole different journey. So I don't want people to think, oh my goodness, it's going to take 5 years. No, it could take a year. It could take less than a year. I mean, once you're like finalized, some agencies, you can get a child within a month. I mean, it really just depends on. But typically, no, it does not take 5 years.
All right. And so not only have you kind of had a different journey through how long it took, but you also had a different experience when you were accepted and the baby was born. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't have the experience that pretty much nobody has. The agency had never seen this experience. Like I said, it took us 5 years to get this place, but I honestly know now why it took us 5 years. I know why God had a plan in all of this. There was a whole other plan that was going on behind the scenes. You know, you're just wondering this whole time, you're just on your knees, begging God, wanting to know why on earth is it taking us for so long, you know, to get a child. We just want one child. We don't even care, you know? And then when our son was born, the birth mom, who is incredible, allowed us to be in there. So she took 36 hours of labor. So we were in that room with her for 36 hours. You really get to know them. They were incredible. They loved the Lord, and just, they picked us because after reading through our profile, they just thought, no, these two couples are it. We really feel it in our gut. We know this is who God would want us to pick. And so they picked us. And so we were there. Chad was going to cut the cord. I got to be the first person to see our son come into the world, which is incredible. We got to be the first people to hold him. And Chad was supposed to cut the cord, but there was a little issue of his breathing when he first came out. So they kind of wanted to take him to the NICU. Only initially because the mom had gotten an infection, the birth mom. And so they just were going to watch him for 48 hours on antibiotics because mom had an infection. No big deal. They sent him to the NICU. We got to be the first ones to hold him. I mean, there really are no words, Sure, I didn't carry him for 9 months, but I waited 5 years for him. And I think that people may not think you love them the same or fall in love. I mean, it's incredible the love you have for them right away. I mean, we had love for him before he was even here, And so we were holding him, my husband, and the doctor or the nurse practitioner comes in and says, I think your son is having seizures. We're like, oh, okay, babies have seizures. People have seizures, not a big deal. So they hooked him up to an EEG. They were monitoring him, and he was having seizures, and they were trying to get him to stop, and they couldn't get him to stop at the hospital we were at. And it was just so crazy because by then you knew when he was having a seizure. So his O2 stats would go down. You could see his eyes go a certain direction. So, after watching this for a full day, you could tell when he was having them, and every time you'd have them, he would he just cried out to God to have them stop, because they weren't stopping and you couldn't understand why. And people are, good people are texting you and they're like, oh, it's normal. I'm like, no, it's not normal. You're not here. You don't see what's going on. Like, these aren't stopping. These are not normal. And so the hospital we were at just said that, we can't get them to stop. We work along Riley Children's Hospital in Indy. We work with them. We really think your best option would be to go there, which I already knew all about this hospital, Riley. I knew they were a great hospital. I was all for it. So I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go there. And because they needed to sedate him and then, have stronger medications to get the seizures to stop. They pretty much had to put him into like an induced coma in order to get these to stop. So we got there and to Riley, and they ran every test imaginable on him because they didn't know why there were seizures. Why are there seizures? What's going on? They had no idea why they were having them. He was having them. So, they ran every test, drugs, alcohol, which the birth mom had already said she wasn't addicted or on any of those. And we believed her, but you have to run every test. And by then you're kind of hoping it's drugs or alcohol because you want a better answer than what maybe the possibility could be. And, they ran a meningitis test, they did a spinal tap. Every test that could be done to a poor little child was done to our little guy. And he was hooked up to everything you could imagine. He's intubated by then. He is put to sleep. And then after about 48 hours, they do get the seizures to stop. And I remember a nurse telling me one time, like, they used everything they possibly could to get these to stop. Like, thank goodness they stopped. And the nurses there, oh my goodness, they were incredible. Oh my goodness, we love them. I just can't even explain how incredible they are to you and to your sweet child. They took care of everything about him. His little fuzzies in his feet, they would get them out. They cleaned him. They loved on him like you would want anybody to love on him. But then after about 48 hours, right when he was supposed to get off his sedation medicine, they were lowering it each time. You started to see his big brown eyes open up and he started to move. Right when, like, literally half an hour before he was supposed to go off of this sedation medicine, I heard the phone ring. I was the only one in the room, and I heard the nurse answer the phone. She was like, yeah, I'm ready to almost, disconnect him from these medications. She's like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, geez. She comes into the room and says, they see artifact on the EEG. I'm like, are they seizures? She's like, I don't know if they're seizures. They're just seeing artifact. And they want me to up his medicine. So the medicine he was on. So therefore, you're starting all over from the beginning. You can't just unhook them from all the medications. Like, it's a slow process to get them off. And I thought, oh man, but they're only going to do it slow. And so when Chad came back, of course, I'm bawling again. And he's like, what's going on? Everything was great when I left. Seizures would stop. And they did, in the meantime, do a quick MRI. So it's very quick. They just put them in, get them out, just to kind of see what's going on. And they did see brain damage. But brain damage to the point where maybe he'd need a wheelchair. Maybe he'd have learning disabilities. Nothing that we wouldn't be able to handle, and weren't excited just to get him home, But then they started again, and then it's just awful. You just sit in the chair and watch the nurses come in and continually up his medicine, knowing that, they're getting worse, and they just can't stop them again. And they just kept coming back into the room every few hours, and you'd see them on the IV pole, and you'd ask them, and they're like, okay, by the next morning, they're telling us he's having more seizures, not the same type of seizures, but more seizures, 10 in an hour, quick ones. Oh, so you're just, I don't even know. So we just kept going with it. They kept doing the medications, but this time it wasn't stopping.